It's time for another episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show, a podcast where I connect you with thought leaders from across the globe, dig into some of my favorite topics like personal development, marketing, spirituality, and pretty much any other shiny object that happens to catch my attention. Today, my special guest is Jason Hewlett, and we're going to be discussing his brand new book, The Promise to the One. Jason, it is truly an honor, sir. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Shaun. Thanks for having me. This is cool. I appreciate it.
Well, I've been looking forward to hanging out with you today, and this is actually our very first time meeting, and I know you're going to be brand new to a bunch of my viewers, a bunch of my listeners, so let's kick this off with a bit of what we might call the Jason Hewlett origin story. For all of us meeting you for the first time today, what do we need to know about you?
Well, I'm a kid who grew up in the mountains of Utah in Park City, a beautiful place known for the Sundance Film Festival now, but back then it was a ghost town known for its silver mining. And I'm very blessed to have a wonderful family. And I grew up thinking that I might be in the insurance profession like my dad, because he had a company that was very successful in that. And then the next thing I knew, I found out I could do some things other people couldn't, with my voice, with my face, with the talents and gifts that God gave me. And right after high school, I went on a mission and served for 2 years in Brazil. And so I'm sure your listeners can sympathize with somebody going around trying to preach, Jesus and change and things in people's lives. And that's where I realized I was different, Shaun, was in Brazil. Going from Utah, where you're kind of different as a kid at school, and then in Brazil, you're like, oh, I guess I am unique. I came home from that mission, and instead of going to college, ended up in Las Vegas and became a performer there, an impersonator, actually, where I was Elton John, as well as Ricky Martin from the Legends in Concert. And so I had a very cool career as far as being a performer, transitioned from that into a one-man show of comedy, music, G-rated, family-friendly fun. And I've done that for almost 20 years full-time, which is crazy to think that's where it's gone. And through the years, it's become not just the entertainment, but now the entertainment upholds this message I call the promise, which is the promises that we make to our clients, our family, the people we work with. And with this book title, The Promise to the One, it's not the promise you make to your boss, to anyone else. It's the promise to yourself. So that's where we've come.
Well, and one of the themes I think people are going to pick up on in the book is this idea that we all have kind of a destiny, a calling, dreams, that I feel like there are things that God pours into us that we see inklings of it when we're growing up. But, we do grow up and life gets hard and we've got a spouse and kids and a mortgage. And so we chase after a bunch of different things. And often those dreams kind of go to some sad place off in the corner and they kind of die and stay small. But more often than not, and I'm speaking from my own life experience and just, friends and family who've walked similar paths, there are times when we go through liminal spaces, compressing spaces in life where we get real, our head gets very clear and we focus on, oh man, that thing I always wanted to do, that thing I always dreamt of, but I've just left hanging there on the side. Again, those are things I feel like God really pours into those things that maybe we were meant to pursue, but we just never did. Would love to have you kind of maybe set the stage for that a bit in terms of, it could be your own life experience or with people that you've worked with and coached and trained. Is that something everybody goes through at some point in their life?
Oh, heavens, yes. It's amazing to watch people having their minds opened completely once what we would consider, in this conversation, that spirit that we know we're supposed to find. We're supposed to step into our calling, and we're supposed to be that person that God sent us here to be. And so when we start to actually identify that for ourselves and really magnify it, then it changes everything in our lives. And it's fun to be able to coach people through this whole process, because a lot of us discover it when we're young. that we have these great gifts and talents. And some people, tell us we're not good at that. So we put it away in a drawer, even though it's something that we loved, whether it's playing the piano or being an artist or, being the person that solves problems. And then the next thing you know, you get a career in your life and the kids come along and now what? And so what's cool about this concept of the promise to the one is saying, it's really asking you, are you fulfilling your life's purpose? Is there a reason why you're here? And have you found it? And are you brave enough to actually live it? That's actually the really big question of this book. Are you brave enough and courageous enough to go for it? Because we do have to cut some strings and we have to go into that river and say, here I come. I'm going to just go where God wants me to go with these talents and gifts that he blessed me with. And equally, I have to continue to find them throughout my life. It's not just when we're a kid, we discover them. We're learning them every single day. I mean, heck, here we are in a pandemic. I have made my living for 20 years, Shaun, in front of thousands of people on a stage. Now, come March 2020, my entire calendar is wiped out. I have nothing I can do now, but I still have all of the things that I've been through with the process of ICM, which we'll talk about, in discovering that I can still do technology. I can still hang in there. I can still do something for my clients. And that's where this promise to the one becomes very powerful in rediscovering something new about ourselves, even as the world shifts around us. How do we survive? How do we keep a promise even while everyone else around us seems to be breaking it, or the world might feel like it's breaking to us?
And in terms of kind of that concept of the promise, I think we often we're like, oh, I want to change this in my life, or I want to go after this dream. And so we'll set a goal, something tied to a specific milestone. But one of the things I feel like you bring across in the book is that the promise is more weightier, it's loftier. There's something maybe even, I might even say more sacred than just a goal. So talk to us about why the promise is actually so much more than just a goal.
Yeah, and I mean, we don't want to discount a goal at all, because I think goals are still very powerful and very important. And you've even done conversations and podcasts with people that are writing books solely about goals. I'm all for the goals. But here's the thing. Why set a goal when we can make a promise? I like that question, because if we make a goal and we, or go for it and we miss it, we just set another goal. There's really not much of a problem there. But if we do make a promise and we break it, we have a serious issue. So that's why a goal becomes almost like, it's like a sacred goal becomes your promise. And I like to say that, we still have to set some goals to get to some of our promises. So goals could be our particulars, where promises become our proclamations. So what are your true proclamations? To your listeners, they might be thinking, well, I don't, it's just semantics to me. And that's okay. But I might question the concept of saying, hey, you set a goal to lose weight over the next 3 months, let's say. But why not just make a promise to live healthy? It's a very simple shift in words and thought and being, but it can perhaps resonate to your listeners. Imagine if God would have said back in the day to Abraham, hey, I'm going to make a goal that you're going to thrive and have lots of kids. I don't know if Abraham would have believed him. He said, I promise you sands and stars and this many, you'll have multitudes of family forever. It was a great promise. God is a God of promises. We are a people of promise. And can we make and keep a promise to ourselves greater than a goal?
Well, I find it interesting what you said about the idea of a goal to lose weight versus making a promise to live healthy. I feel like almost if I just set a goal to lose weight, I'm going to be very focused on watching the scale and maybe making a couple of changes to try to hit that specific objective. However, if I make a promise to live healthy, well, that means a whole lot of different things. That might mean I'm getting more sleep, I'm drinking more water, I'm exercising, I'm shifting what I'm eating. And all that will have a result of helping me to lose weight. But I feel like it's like a different level of promise, or the scope, I guess, is just a bit wider with that idea of being healthy. And, and that's something I feel like you could actually apply it into more areas of your life versus just a goal to lose weight. I like that. That's a helpful example. Let's get into your process now. So you've got this 3-step process where you work with people to identify, clarify, and magnify. So however it looks like, to explain that succinctly, give us a flyover of your 3-step process.
Yeah, so I used to just tell people or ask them, I'd say, hey, what's your promise? Or essentially, what's your signature move? Meaning, we're all known for something. We're all good at something. So are we sharing that in everything that we do? It's very much like your brand promise. You know, when you get an Apple product, you expect a certain thing from the commercial versus the reality. So what the ICM process is really a dissection of discovering your greater promise. And so how we do that is first identify as the discovery process, meaning you're just going to, if you're willing to, your listeners are willing to write down on a paper their goals, their talents, their strengths, their skills, the things that they've learned through their lives that make them who they are. And then they could start circling them and come up with a top 10 list, which they would consider their signature moves, what they're known for. I know for me, starting as a career in entertainment, I put first that I'm an entertainer, I'm a musician, I'm a comedy guy. Those are kind of my first ones that I identify. Think about yours. What are you known for? What do you like to do? What do you identify yourself as? So that's identify. Clarify is asking other people you trust, maybe your family, maybe your coworkers, even your customers, the people you work with. And when they start to tell you, they clarify for you words that you didn't realize in the first place. So if I identify myself as an entertainer, my friends have identified me as extremely hardworking. And that's why it works for me to be a self-employed entertainer speaker. And so that gives me another word, or tenacious. They told me I was tenacious, or my wife told me I was thoughtful when I just thought I was funny. She said, I didn't marry you because you're funny, married you because you're thoughtful. Those words now give me something to hang my hat on. And now that allows me to have a bunch of words that I consider my signature moves. And now magnifies the final part of the ICM process: identify, clarify, magnify. Now, am I willing to magnify what I've learned? If funny is what it is, in my opinion, am I funny in my interactions with people, or am I holding it back? Or my wife said I was thoughtful. Am I thoughtful in how I deal with a client, or in my thoughtful how I am at church? Am I thoughtful with what they're telling us now that we need to wear the mask, even if we don't want to wear the mask? Am I thoughtful enough to wear the mask for other people? It's that kind of concept. How am I going to magnify my signature moves? And that's what the promise really, really comes to with that process.
And in terms of that third step of magnify, I feel like that's where the rubber meets the road. We have to be willing to start owning some of those things. Why do people often struggle with that third step?
Oh, yeah, that's the hardest part, because once you identify what you're good at and then you clarify it with others, well, now you have to keep that promise. It gets to be scary at that point. And, that's where I liken it to a musician, let's say, where there's somebody like a Louis Armstrong from way back when. He was known as a trumpet player, and he was the greatest of the jazz era, right? But then he started to sing. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, oh, yes, I love you. Now, a lot of people told him, hey, don't sing because your voice isn't that beautiful. It's not resonant like a Sinatra or somebody else. Louis Armstrong kept singing. He kept the promise to share that gift with which only he has, which God sent from up above right into him. He discovered it. He identified, clarified with a lot of people that it was also okay, and he magnified it. Now, are we doing that? Or are we holding it back? That's the tough part, is when somebody says to you, hey, that thing you do with your face is too weird. And I say, this is what I can do. And for your listeners, they don't get what I'm doing, but I'm showing some faces that make me unique. I use that every single day. I use voices. I make things funny. I tell stories, and I share my gift. But a lot of people are like, I discovered that when I was little. I put it in the drawer. It's now there forever. I'm not bringing it out, so they'll take me serious. And I say, nope. It's time to bring it forth, my brother. You need to share that with the world, because that's what you got.
one of the things I was glad to discover in the book is you encourage readers to get their own promise journal. And I notice, or I know people have a range of feelings about journaling. I can speak to my own experiences. I've journaled probably for the past 3-4 years. A lot of times it's in my prayer times or when I'm reflecting on goals or kind of my alone quiet times when I'm thinking and trying to just be alone and look at my life. And what I found so helpful about journaling is as I go through the year, as I can look back on things from 3 months ago, 6 months ago, 2 years ago, and I discover so many ways that I've shifted and changed and achieved things. And I discover other things that I've left dangling. It's like, oh my gosh, I forgot about that, or I forgot I was trying to do that. And so as kind of from a hindsight perspective, I've found journaling to be extremely helpful. But in terms of the journey with a promise to the one and having the promise journal, why is that a huge asset to people as they're going on this journey?
Well, if someone hasn't journaled before, this is your opportunity to start. The journaling is really a cathartic experience, first of all, but it's also a place where you can, make new promises to yourself, go back and see what you've maybe left dangling, as you said. I'm curious, Shaun, why did you start? Like, what was the impetus?
Well, I'll share. So we talked about this a little bit before the interview got started, but I was thrust into kind of the charismatic publishing world as a guy who came out of a very conservative background. And so I started going to a lot of conferences and events where I would encounter people where they'd want to pray for me, or they'd be like, man, I've got a prophetic word or a word of encouragement. I feel like God really wants to like drop this on you right now. And so honestly, I just, I'd record those on my phone often at those conferences or events. And then I would start processing them in my journal or just really press in and pray about, okay, God, was this legit? Was this person a little bit off their rocker? And so I really got into journaling about, I guess, 5-6 years ago to start processing the things that I was encountering in this charismatic publishing faith world that was new to me. It was very foreign. I hadn't been a part of that world until I joined the Chosen Books team. So practically speaking, it was a way for me to process and work through what I was encountering in that new space, if you will. And then I've just continued to do it. I mean, I've expanded it far beyond that. I'm, processing what I'm working on, goals I have as I'm praying, what I feel like God's saying to me. So it's very faith and professional kind of all-in-one journal for me. But yeah, it was really a means to process what I was encountering in the new world I was a part of.
And I appreciate you sharing that. I don't want to flip the roles here and start interviewing you here, but I just wanted your listeners to realize the power of starting it no matter where you are in your journey, whether you started when you're 10 years old or start when you're 70, it doesn't matter. It's about processing what's happening in your life and where you want it to go. Really what it becomes when I'm speaking to those that believe in God, which is so great with this podcast, is that it's almost as if you're having the conversation of a prayer through a journal with yourself and God, and He can give you those answers. It's this amazing personal revelatory experience, a journal is. And it's yourself answering questions for you that the Spirit comes to you. And it is the process of processing what's happening to you, as well as not just, hey, this is what I did today, It's also like, what did I feel about what I did today? And then it's the next step is, what promises am I going to make to continue that behavior or to continue this success that I feel, or to allow my purpose to come forth at a greater level? So that's why the Promise Journal is a little extra that you get with the book when you purchase it. Within the book, there's a hidden secret link that you can go to my website and check out the Promise Journal. It's pretty cool. And it just gives you some kind of prompts and ideas as to why journaling is so essential. So thanks for sharing that with me, Shaun.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the helpful things about journaling or just writing down notes in general, I have some friends who are 100% digital and they've just cleared out paper out of their life completely. But for me, I feel I type so much all day long, like things aren't, it's not weighty to type things on a keyboard, but when I write it down, it suddenly becomes tangible, real, just maybe it's the tactile nature of the experience. But yeah, I feel like if I journal about it, then it suddenly has come to life, or maybe I'm almost agreeing to actually run with that a bit more than if I just typed it in notes in a Google Doc or something.
Well, that's well said. I do encourage rather than just typing it, but a lot of people, that's their best way. So if you want to go get like one of those journaling apps that you can find, like One Day or Day One, or I can't remember what it's called. My friends use that. They just type it on their phone. That's great. I, like you, prefer the weightiness, like you say, of the book, of the pen in hand. And there is neurological science that proves that is a better way to make a commitment to yourself is to actually physically write it down with your hand, with a pen, with the paper. It's the real deal. So I encourage your listeners to consider it if you've never journaled. And if you have, good for you. Go back, look at your journal. What happened a year ago? Have you kept that promise? Go make a simple promise. One of the ones I like to share in the book is like, I remember reading in my journal as I was writing the book, I was like, what are some promises I broke to myself this year? One was that I was going to pay down some of the principal on the balance of my mortgage. And that was what I wrote a year ago, that I'm going to do this thing. And I looked at my mortgage statement. I went, I just paid barely any towards it, like just interest. And that moment I went into my bank account, I made a simple little promise. I'm going to automatically add $50, just barely anything. Because at the time I couldn't make it work to throw thousands at it. $50 a month, that's a new promise that I can make. And now it's automatic and it works.
Well, and one kind of weird sort of side conversation quick in terms of journaling. I mean, I would encourage people, get a nice journal, maybe even get a nice pen to go with it. I find as I travel and have things like my journal, which is a nice journal, or wearing an old school watch, some of these kind of retro things that some of us get back into, they're great conversation starters. I mean, I can't believe how many times people have asked me, like, that's a really cool watch, that, that manual watch that's not an Apple Watch. Why do you like to wear that? Or if you have a, kind of a cool looking journal, people will actually ask you about it. And so some of these things, just in the terms of networking and meeting people, can open up really unique conversations, places people would have never, ever chosen to even go with you. But sometimes some of these things can just be prompts as you're meeting people. Well, they will bring these things up and just open the door up wide for you to be able to share. So not really related at all to what we're talking about, but just in terms of my experience, my whole job, even though I'm not traveling a lot right now, a lot of it's based off building relationships and networking and meeting people. And, and so sometimes it can be the silliest things that open conversations, or even wear funky shoes, weird shirts, all these things. Like, I can't even count anymore the number of conversations that come off of just the oddest things. But if you intrigue people, or you stand out in a crowd, people will ask you things. And so be willing to be different or retro. It works. God will use it to put people in your path. I guarantee it.
I love that tangent. That was awesome. And, I found the same thing on the planes think about it. We're on our phones or we're on our laptops all day. And then all of a sudden you're walking down the aisle on the plane and you look down and someone's actually writing in cursive in a journal. Like, it's very interesting how people look at you different. I remember the flight attendant that came by and said, I've never seen anyone writing on the plane while we're, getting ready to taxi and take off. And I said, I'm writing a book. And she was like, really? And then we started the conversation and, she's bringing me extra treats and now we're friends. So I like your point. It's good.
Two themes that come up early in the book are the themes of character and integrity. And, I feel like, as we all look back in hindsight, we have seasons where we walked in great character and integrity, and other seasons where we fell off the wagon, so to speak, or we didn't keep up promises that we'd made to ourselves. So in terms of the growth journey that we're going on in this process, where do character and integrity come into play, and why are they critical for the journey?
Yeah, a lot of people might interchange those, and they're
Right.
Obviously different pieces within the book. But when it comes to your character, it's just really a matter of sitting down and saying to yourself, what is it that I want to make of my life? And what are my interactions with others? As far as, even going to bed at night and having, that character enough to make a commitment for the morning to wake up a little earlier and go for that jog. That's character, is keeping that promise to ourselves. And then as far as making sure that we, utilize that every single day in some different way, it's in our interactions with others and what they see in us. And I share the story in the first chapter about character regarding my opportunity in Las Vegas. When I was starting to get pretty good, I started to get noticed by a lot of very big time people. And within 3 years of performing in Las Vegas as an impersonator and doing a one-man show of over 100 musical voices, I was getting offers to come and have my own show there. And what did that mean? Well, that meant that I had to change my act. I had to listen to the producers and the writers, and I had to maybe adjust a little bit of the stuff that I had originally set out to do. When I identified myself, to your listeners at the beginning of this, I identified myself as a G-rated, family-friendly entertainer. And that's what I started as. Now, had I signed this contract in Las Vegas, I was offered to be a headliner and have my own show and be produced and managed by others. The path was incongruent with what I had set out originally to do. Now, that's okay if it's a better path that you go and take a better one, but at this point, it was to digress. It was to not be congruent with my character. And they needed me to do a show that was different than I had set out to do. And so did I have a choice in that moment to make, which would change my life and my wife and, our family's career? I guess so. But in essence, I had already made the choice years earlier when the character was forged within me to only do clean, appropriate, family-friendly performances for any audience that I was in front of. And because I made that choice when I was a teenager, and it was really my, come to Jesus moment, if you will, that I said, I will always do that type of performance. And when I'm sitting in front of the big opportunity with the casino brass, the casino owner was there, and the lawyers and the production, and they were so good at what they did. And I said, I can't do it. I left that opportunity. That's called character. And then when we talk about our integrity, we think about the integrity of a building that's been compromised, right? In a storm or something. It's because something within it has shifted. And so what is the integrity that we're willing to share forth with the world? What is that foundational piece within us? And that's what I'm truly teaching, is what is your foundation built upon? Is it built upon the rocks? Is it built upon the sand? Are we the foolish man? Well, we can choose. And I choose to build it upon the foundation of integrity and character.
And in terms of the journey readers are going to go on in the book, is it like one big macro promise that we're stepping into, or are we making kind of sort of sub promises in varying areas that kind of feed up or trickle down from that kind of big umbrella macro level process? I know somebody has that question.
That's a cool question. And, I haven't thought of it that way, but essentially, you could come up with your huge promise proclamation. And I do encourage everyone that takes the ICM process to actually come up with their actual, promise proclamation to the world. But after every single chapter, there's some exercises that encourage these micro promises that you're going to make, whether it's the promise of health or the promise of habits or the promise of service, those types of things. And so as they start to make those micro ones, then you've got the overarching promise. And my overarching promise, as I've come to, created it probably over 2 decades ago, was that I'm here to help bring more joy to the world with my gifts and talents and help others discover theirs. And that's a very simple proclamation, but that's why I wake up every day and do what I do. And that allows me to keep all those smaller promises scattered throughout the day in my life.
And in terms of the chapters in the book, I think one that people might not often think about in terms of, working to achieve goals or kind of working to keep promises to themselves is the idea of serving others. I'd love to have you take us into a bit of what you cover in that chapter. Why is serving others important on the one hand for how we get to contribute and bless and help others, but also what's that return that is just innate in entering into the process of serving others?
When we think about service, I think sometimes we go into it with the right frame of mind where we're like, I'm so excited to do this. And then you get in the trenches, you're like, oh, dang, this is for real. Like I'm stuck. And so the promise of service really comes down to our intention and the reason for why we're doing it. If it's for a social media post, then that's a different reason than to say, heck yes, I'll do this even when it starts raining on us and we're in the mud and we're still digging through to find what we need to do to serve these people. And so when it comes down to our true self and our true service, what is the reason behind it? And how do we actually feel about doing it? I was doing a performance. If I recall, I shared this in the book. I was doing a performance for a group and I was feeling pretty sulky about it because they didn't pay me very much. And it was a favor for a friend and they told me they had no money. And so then they're giving away cars at the event. That kind of thing where you're like, oh, you had no money, you liar. And so, when the service starts to become this thing where I'm being had, that's when you go, okay, what was my original intention? But as I was going through this process of processing for myself, why did I do this service today? Lady came up to me and she was trying to give me a compliment. And she's going, can I tell you how great you were? And I just kind of gave her a cold shoulder, which is completely against my everything, my personality, my promise to myself, everything. And I was just so grumpy. I'm wrapping cords to try to get out of there and get my gear and go. And she kept at me. She's like, can I tell you how great you were? And I'm like, I know I was great. Thank you, And she finally grabs my shoulders and spins me around. And she goes, young man, I'm trying to give you a compliment and tell you how you have blessed my life. This morning, I found out I have multiple sclerosis. I have been crying all day. I'm not even sure how much longer I have to live. And you helped me forget that for 1 hour this horrible day. Thank you for blessing my life with your gifts. Shaun, I was like, oh man, like that's what I needed. I needed to do that service. I needed her to tell me that. And how often do we need an angel like that in our lives to remind us why we're doing what we're doing? And I'm so grateful for her reminding me of my promise of service.
Well, and whether we're talking about the chapters in the book or as you cover this in talks or coaching, of all kind of the habits, I don't know, whatever we want to call whatever you have in the different chapters, like are there any that are more important than others and I'm thinking more in terms of like, we can make a list of like, these are the 10 areas I'm going to focus and pour into, and it's going to trickle up and help that big macro level goal. Like we talked about earlier, if people had to focus on just 2 or 3, are there any that are more important than others in terms of helping you scale or move forward? I'm just curious what you've seen through the years.
Well, as far as the readers that have told me that have read, because the ebook came out in May and the actual physical book comes out in mid-August, but the actual feedback I've received is if you read chapter 1, which is character, you're going to read the whole book. That's what I've been told. But I would say the most important are front loaded. So it would be chapter 1 and 2 are character, and then the ICM process to discover your signature moves and your promise. And then you'd have to skip closer to the end and go to the chapter on calling. And the calling is truly just magnifying and stepping into the river that is so frightening for us to step into, because often we're on those little tributaries and little side streams. Can we get back to the main current that God sent us to this earth to discover, as well as to forge ourselves? And so, yeah, those would be probably my chapters I'd recommend.
Well, and I was just thinking about maybe even answering my own question. Everybody is kind of a unique snowflake, so to speak. Not that you're weak and wimpy, just you're unique, like every single snowflake is unique, just to clarify. Probably not the best term to use these days. But in terms of, I might have areas, maybe I'm doing really well in terms of serving others, but not doing as well in health, or vice versa. So to some degree, I guess I could have answered my own question. Everybody is going to have their own unique experience walking through this material, because there may be areas they're already excelling in, and so maybe they're not going to focus as much there. And there's other areas that are huge growth areas, and they'll probably put a lot more emphasis in those areas. So anyways, I could have answered my own question, but thank you for answering it as well. Jason, if you had to sum it up, when a reader gets to the last page of the book, what's that big idea, that shift, that change that you want everybody to discover as they're spending time in the pages of The Promise of the One?
Really, it's just that they already have it in them. It's always been there, and they just need to be brave enough to go for it. If they utilize their promises that they made when they were young, the dreams that they had for themselves, that they would now be able to still do it. That doesn't mean go throw your living away to go join the circus if that's your one dream, but maybe it does mean to add a little bit more fun and fanciful joy to your lives and to your family. And so what are you bringing every single day? It really comes down to just how present are you? How truly committed are you to living your purpose? And that's the main hope that I hope that people will get when they come away reading this book, and they'll come away with I know people are laughing. I know they're crying. I know they're coming to realizations. They might start journaling. They might reintroduce themselves to God if they've, stepped off that path for a minute and forgotten that he's carrying them now. But it's a very, very powerful read if you're willing to go that deep with yourself. And like you, with the journaling, if you're willing to go there and start that conversation with God and with yourself, the promise to the one is not, I say it's the promise to you, and it is. It truly is. But there's a chapter in there called God. And when I wrote the book, I said, well, this is just going to be a self-published book, so I'll just write it how I want. And I remember sending it to the publisher, and I thought, well, I'm done with once it gets to the chapter on God. And they contacted me and they said, hey, there's one chapter we might need to consider, taking out, because you're going to lose a lot of sales since you're a business speaker. I said, which one? They said, the one on God. And I said, oh, yeah, if we have to take that out, I'll just self-publish it. I apologize for wasting your time. And the publisher said, that's what I needed to hear. If you're willing to go down that path, then we are with you as well. Just testing you out. I appreciate that kind of a publisher, and they've gone to bat with me. But I do want your listeners to realize that when they are going through this book and close it, they go, I think I know more of what my purpose is. I can go forth and magnify this promise.
And in terms of, self-help books, personal development books, there are a wide range of books that will lead you into various processes and experiences and journeys to try to help you figure out a lot of the same stuff that Jason and I have been talking about today. More than anything, if I've learned one thing through the years, talking to lots of authors and reading lots of development books myself, the best personal development book is the one that you're actually going to use, the one that you're actually going to internalize the process and put it into practice and walk out the steps. So, if you're saying, I'm not sure that this book is right for me, well, maybe this one isn't the right one, but I know there's probably a lot of you like, actually, this sounds like a process I could go through and get something out of. So, the best one is always the one that you're actually going to read the book and take the steps and do the things. And because don't just read the book, because I know a lot of people, they'll read something, they'll laugh, they'll cry, they'll connect with the stories, they'll do one or two of the exercises. And if that's what you're going to do, you're kind of wasting your time, because you really have to see the process through to the end and keep moving with the things that you've set in motion to see the change that you're actually desiring. So my challenge to you, if you're watching us, listening to this, head out and pick up a copy of The Promise to the One, read it, do the steps, internalize it, and keep moving ahead, moving forward after you're done with the book. Keep working in the journal and processing. One question I didn't even have in my notes, but I always like to ask for this kind of a book is, how often do you revisit the process? I mean, with this sort of a journey, you're making promises, you're kind of setting up things you want to pursue and go after. Is there a certain time period that you should maybe revisit the process, kind of reassess? Some people do things like this on an annual basis. I have friends who revisit things like this, say, every 6 months. So whether it's how you approach it or how you've seen it work well with others, how often do we kind of, big picture revisit our promises and decide that maybe we need to make some shifts and changes again?
That's a great question. Nobody's ever asked. I love that. I know with my children, as we've gone through this process, we actually do this every year before the school year begins, just to make sure that they see what we see in them and that their teachers are going to notice in them and that sort of thing for the identify, clarify process. And then they can magnify it. So for kids, if you're going to take your kids through it, maybe that's easier for your listeners to start with the children and be like, hey, let's go through this process. And then as you see how beneficial it is to the child, then you would do it for yourself. Or if you're a leader, you take your, someone you manage or lead through the process, then you say, this could be for me. I know for myself, Shaun, I've actually gone through it, I would say maybe on a monthly basis during this pandemic time and the quarantine to say, am I utilizing what I know I should be? Or are there new things I can discover in myself? And, revisiting the New Year's resolutions, kind of a concept of once a year, that whole deal, that's cool to write down your resolutions. But where are your promise proclamations? Are they posted on a wall? Do they become you? I know that once I start to shift, and I know you're a runner, and so once I start running, am I going to do this every day? I mean, then it just becomes a part of you. Then your promise doesn't need to be revisited because you just naturally do it, like running or brushing your teeth or saying your prayers. And so I don't know if I have a definitive answer. I just know revisiting it as often as you see fit is a beneficial thing.
Well, and one thing I want to point out to the listeners, the viewers, is Jason just said he actually uses his own process. I'm always encouraged when an author's like, actually, this is this is how I live my life. I do the steps. Yes, I've written it down so you can learn from my experiences and you can do it too. But it's always a good indicator when an author actually lives out their own process. I'm always kind of scared when an author can't give me examples like, actually, this makes a huge difference in my life. So thank you for letting us know you actually use your own work. That gives me faith that it can actually do something important in my life as well. Almost time to wrap up, but one or two more questions here. I've been podcasting, getting close to 10 years now. I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of authors. And the one thing I've learned is the writing journey shapes everybody. You can be an author who's written 50 books. And when you write that 51st book, that journey, that process of wrestling with the ideas, putting them down on paper or fingers to keyboard, knowing that that's going to go out to the world. I feel like you put yourself out in a unique way where you're like the poster boy or poster girl for your message. So there's a lot going through your head as you're writing, but it always shifts you. It always changes you in the process. So I'm curious for you, Jason, on this side of writing this book, like how did you shift or change in the process, or what did you learn in the process of putting this together?
Great question. I've learned that I'm a liar at the beginning because I used to go to bed every night and be like, did I write? Yeah, I wrote today. No, I didn't write today. And I was lying to myself. And it wasn't, I was listening to Steve Pressfield's The War of Art on Audible and trying everything to get there. And I tried for 3 years to write this book. But because there are 3 elements to the book that I teach when I speak, or to the speech, is the promise to the audience, which is your client, the promise to the family, which is your team and your family at home, and then the promise to the one, which is yourself. I was trying to write that book. And it wasn't until I realized I can only write the promise to the one first, because that's the most important place to start, for there to be a foundation for the book and for the series. And soon, there will be the promise to the family, the promise to the team, the promise to your client. That's all forthcoming. But Shaun, I had never sat down and tried to write a book. I mean, it was a joke, and it was a broken promise day after day. It wasn't until I said to my family, I said, hey guys, I'm driving up to the mountains and I'm going to stay in the motorhome until this book is done. And I took bunch of cans of sardines and some crackers. And I drove and I sat in my motorhome chair with my laptop, typing. My beard got longer. It was a 3-day odyssey of what I would consider a divine download. And 50,000 words came from me percolating on this idea and having spoken about it for 3 years on stages around the world. All the stories hit, all the chapters came, it all just kind of flowed. And I mean, I don't know if that's ever going to happen again. Maybe that's just a beginner's luck moment. But for me, trying to write for 3 years and finally having that explosive moment that changed it all, and that the book has not changed very much since that writing. But I know that the next book, I just have to keep writing and writing and writing and writing. And I love that process. I consider myself a writer now, more probably than anything else on my signature moves list for myself.
Well, two things I'll pull on from what you just said. On the one hand, you've actually presented this material on stages for a time, and that's one of the things that's been interesting to me as I've encountered business authors, personal development authors, a lot of people who, like you, are itinerant, speak, entertain, talk for a living on a stage. I'm amazed at the number of people who perfect a message, test it on audiences for sometimes a year, 2 years, 3 years before they'll actually write the book. So they see how it hits people. They're getting active, dynamic feedback of how people are responding, what it's doing for people. And so I know that's an opportunity not everybody has to do, but if you can be in a position where you can do webinars or, even if it's virtual conferences these days, to be able to work out your material and your ideas with a crowd who can give you feedback, that's immensely helpful because you're going to understand what the audience actually needs in a way that you just can't if you just wrote a book without any audience interaction. And one of the things that sounds like you kind of fell into in terms of a first-time author is the trap of trying to put everything into your first book. I mean, it is interesting, but new authors will often try to kind of press what could be sometimes 3, 4, 5 books into a single book. And it's like, nobody's looking for you to write the ultimate book because it'll be like 700 pages. And everybody's like, this is like a life's work, not a journey of development. So interesting that you kind of had some of those same challenges that every first-time author has. But I love that when you got to the end of what you just shared, you said, well, now I am an author, or you would describe yourself as a writer. So that means you finally got to a place where you're willing to accept that that's part of who you are now.
It's becoming a signature move I'm very excited about. And that's why revisiting that is important, the whole process. But let me just expound on that. And then I know we need to wrap up. But here's the thing. Being on stage in front of all those audiences for so long, I was actually doing in my own opinion, some damaging work as I was still trying to figure out, how do I help people with their signature moves? I mean, Shaun, I would get on stage and I would do all this performing, and I'd be singing, hey, we're singing a high, we're singing way high, ha, 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 ha. And then I'd say, hey, what's your signature move? Like the Bee Gees. What they knew theirs, what's yours? And people would be sitting there like, I don't know. And I would not give them a formula. I didn't have a process. I didn't have the ICM process. I remember watching myself back on video and I was like, I think I'm like confusing people more with this motivational, inspirational message. And it wasn't until I sat down with a guy who has a brain 100% different than mine. He's a genius. His name is Steven Shapiro. He wrote, he's written tons of great books. But I mean, this guy, he watched my speech with me on video and he goes, where's the formula? Where's the process? And he and I created the ICM process as we sat there, and I had been speaking about it forever. And it was all of a sudden this formula that I could now hand somebody and say, hey, this works. And Shaun, when I got on stage the next time and I shared the ICM process, people's minds were like, oh my gosh, you've given me a formula. And I was like, oh, now I can write the book. Pretty cool.
Well, and that's one thing too that I think you're hitting on that is critical. If you're writing a book that is development process driven, being able to have something as simple as the ICM process that somebody will remember that when they read the book, and they'll go like, oh, I read this book. It's been really helping me. Actually, the process is pretty straightforward. It's this. And so something that can be captured in kind of a phrase or a sentence, something that's sticky and memorable, that makes, put on my marketing hat, that makes the book that much more transferable, potentially viral, or people, if you really touch somebody, they'll probably go tell 5-6 people about the book and how it changed their life or how it's making an impact. But if you lack that kind of a sticky phrase or some kind of a statement, they might tell the title. But if you can have something that's a little bit more concrete and unique that stands out, I feel like people are more likely to do that. So interesting that's how you were able to partner with somebody with a bigger brain to come up with the ICM process. That's fantastic.
Totally.
Jason, for the listeners, the viewers who'd like to connect with you, find out about the book, find out about the various kinds of work, coaching, consulting, all the things you do, where are some of the places we can hang out with you on the internet?
Well, I'm all over the social media stuff, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. LinkedIn's where I'm at most. YouTube, have an active page there, but I really just prefer to connect with people personally. JasonHewlett.com, Hewlett spelled like Hewlett Packard. And they could even email me, jason@jasonhewlett.com if they wanted. But yeah, I love helping people find that place, as well as, getting to a better space in their own purpose and their journey and finding their promise. And then I love discussing that with the meeting professionals and helping them come up with solutions for their next event. That's how I make my living, and hopefully it'll continue. We'll see, right?
Right. Yes, I think we're all dreaming of a time when we can actually go out and travel and do the things we were used to doing. Like you, I travel a ton. Normally, I think I've had 3 total trips this year, which is just really bizarre at this point. Now, not to say being at home hasn't had its own blessings, but it certainly is a weird time being stuck in my little closet office at home. But for those of you who'd like to connect with Jason, find out more, I'll be sure to include detailed links in the show notes. Places where you can connect with Jason at his website, on social media, places where you can pick up your very own copy of the book as well. It's time to bring this episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show to a close. Many thanks for being a part of my conversation with Jason Hewlett. Once again, our book today was The Promise to the One. And if you'd like to find out more on Jason, the book, and all the various things he does, be sure to head over to his website. You can find that at jasonhewlett.com. And Jason, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing with us today. It's been a joy and a pleasure to have you on the show. Got to make noise. They're not going to see you do that. It'll just focus on me.
That's right. Thank you, my brother. It's been so fun with you. Thank you. And good luck at being at home with all those kids. You're so blessed.